Hi, I'm Donna. Welcome back to my vlog. This is my take on why Second World War happened. A summary of the factors that triggers the Second World War. So, after World War I in 1918, the world was ruled by few empires, powerful empires. The world as we know it today is a lot different from how it was before Second World War. Today, at least 195 sovereign states and countries maintain territorial rights and resolving conflicts diplomatically with United Nations as a whole. The world before Second World War was a world of imperial domination. Wars and treaties constantly changed the empire's territorial claims. The world map constantly changed too. In the height of British Empire, the world looked like this. So the phrase literally means the sun never sets on British Empire. But that was not the permanent case. This was British Empire before Second World War. While from Russian Empire to Soviet Union, their territory was almost the same. Of course, we are aware that some territories or states became independent after the fall of Russian Empire. But Soviet Union size was a force to be reckoned with. Although not as massive as the British Empire and the Soviet Union in terms of territory, French Empire have also a commanding stand to the world scene because of her numerous African and Asian colonies. Now, this is at the height of German Empire before losing the First World War. She also have an African colonies. Well, in fact, claiming what is the leftover of British and French, and a tiny share of colonies in Asia. While this is Germany before Second World War, lost an empire and some parts of their country. So then, before the Second World War, German Empire no longer exists. The Imperial Japan before Second World War have already conquered Manchuria in China, and this was the height of the Japanese Empire. So I would say territorial expansion or imperial domination is the primary cause. That's why. Secondly, ideology. So the conflicting ideologies of these powerful empires were their banners to win the support of their people, some sort of propaganda. The Imperial British and French for democracy, well, except that it is in conflict with their imperial colonies. The Nazi Germany, meanwhile, for their 1,000 years Reich, in which only for the racially pure Aryan race, so eliminating others, that means annihilating the others, as manifested in their so-called Nazi Bible, Mein Kampf. The Soviet Union then raised the banner for communism, in which in ideals seem to be promising or ambitious. Well, for the lack of word, I would use promising and ambitious with a question mark. For Imperial Japan and Fascist Italy, territorial expansion or just plainly imperial domination. Lastly, economic problem. For Japan, their invasion of Manchuria in China was the answer to their growing industries. They need raw materials to fuel it like oil, rubber, and lumber. For Germany, at the end of World War I, their defeat was the end of their empire, and resulting to their unconditional surrender, which was then stipulated in the Treaty of Versailles. There are three most important points on that treaty. First, it demanded Germany to pay for war reparation. That's for the losses and damages caused by the war. So Germany has to pay, but they could not afford. So that leads to Germany's hyperinflation. Secondly, their military restrictions. So like they're not allowed to have more than 100,000 men. And third, they lose some of their territories. So therefore, the concoction of territorial expansion or imperial domination, conflicting ideologies, and economic crisis or economic problem resulted to the Second World War. 3rd of September 1939, finally, the declaration of war by Great Britain and France to Germany.
I am speaking to you from the Cabinet Room at 10 Downing Street. This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note stating that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
It was at least 5 years too late, because on August 1934, after the death of the German President Hindenburg, Hitler united the chancellorship and the presidency of Germany under the new title, the Führer. So as Germany's economy improved, Hitler's regime became strong, and a cult-like of Führer worship grew ever stronger in Germany. So in 1935, Hitler's German troops swell up, and that is directly against the Treaty of Versailles. So in 1936, Hitler took his troops to march into the Rhineland. Rhineland is a demilitarized zone. This is a strip of German land that borders France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, which was taken away from the German when they lost the war. So this is like a buffer zone for these three countries. This German's action was not built properly to begin with, so Hitler just got away with it. Now on March 1938, Germany took Austria, and nobody opposed Hitler in doing that. So Austria became one of the provinces of Germany. 7 months after the annexation of Austria, so that was March of 1938, and on October 1938, Hitler just took Sudetenland. Sudetenland then was part of Czechoslovakia, which has a majority of German population. And after that, in March of 1939, Hitler is not satisfied with just a Sudetenland. He invaded the whole of Czechoslovakia. After his success in Czechoslovakia on March of 1939, on the 1st of September, Hitler invaded Poland.
The German foe begins its ruthless march of conquest and sets the stage for World War II. Poland's 34 million inhabitants, crushed, scattered, and enslaved. Tens of thousands of square miles of territory shrink before the movement of lightning-armored columns. Poland and the world learn the meaning of a grim new word, blitzkrieg.
But even before the official declaration of war by Great Britain and France to Germany on the 3rd of September 1939, Nazi Germany, Soviet Union, and Imperial Japan have already started their atrocities. For Nazi Germany, on the 9th up to 10th of November 1938, the Holocaust starts. It was the night of riots and attack to all the Jews in Germany and Austria, by which this time Austria was already annexed by Hitler's Nazi. This event was called the Kristallnacht. This name symbolized the shattering of Jewish existence in Germany. After Kristallnacht, the Nazi regime made Jewish survival in Germany impossible.
Before Kristallnacht, living under Nazism had been hard and humiliating for Jews.
I remember the glass in the road from the smashed shop windows. I remember the smoking synagogue with fire department firemen standing there making sure that adjoining buildings would not be affected, but doing nothing about the ruined synagogues that had been put on fire. And I realized that times were going to be very dangerous and very difficult for people like us.
From Berlin to Vienna, a rush to emigrate began, and quickly stalled as nation after nation refused to accept Jews.
You couldn't go anywhere. Nobody would give you a visa. Nobody wanted you. It was the end of a time, a period in world history when a world recession had taken place and unemployment in many countries was still very high. Everybody had a great deal of sympathy for these poor people, these Jewish refugees, but nobody wanted them.
For Imperial Japan, by 1930s, Japanese already immigrated to Manchuria, eventually invading it. But the Japanese atrocities in China peak in 1937 on what is now called the Rape of Nanking.
我将来就是3代人，把这2个老头老太一被打死一个，那个老将一肚的，就是冒着那个枪我都点东西。 但是老小都给他打死了。
While in Soviet Union, by the way, they already built concentration camps in 1922, 23 of them, way ahead than that of Nazi Germany. But this is for the purpose of detaining persons of accused in political offenses. By 1928 to 1932, many more collective labor camps were established in northern Russia and Siberia, and millions of farmers was driven from their farm and their collective civilization program. Well, the communist vision. And it was worsened in 1936 to 1938 when Stalin's great political purges indiscriminately killing thousands, if not millions, of his people.
Between 1929 and 1933, up to 5 million people perished. Instead of creating communal farms, they were now digging communal graves. Stalin suppressed any mention of this in the cities, even though almost 30 million people were starving.
I went to the city of Kharkov. I was in a good compartment, and when I opened the window, like this, there was a horrible famine going on outside. I saw on the railway.
Less than a year later, on June 1940, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg fell under the hands of Nazi Germany. Nazi domination made Hitler invincible. He even made President Roosevelt of America a laughingstock.
Endlich die Bereitwilligkeit in die Zusicherung zu geben, dass die deutschen Streitkräfte das Staatsgebiet folgender unabhängiger Nationen nicht angreifen, und er nennt Finnland, Lettland, Litauen, Estland, Norwegen, Schweden, Dänemark, Niederlande, Belgien, Großbritannien, Irland, Frankreich, Portugal, Spanien, die Schweiz, Liechtenstein, Luxemburg, Polen, Ungarn, Rumänien, Jugoslawien, Russland, Bulgarien, Türkei, Irak, Arabien, Syrien, Palästina, Ägypten.
June 1940, the Nazi Germany dominated mainland Europe. The Allied forces then retreated to Dunkirk, and it was now known as the greatest successful military migration of all time. The fall of France left Great Britain alone, but the armed forces of the Allied troops like the French, Belgian, Dutch, Czechs, and Poles were also migrated together with the British forces. Only after Imperial Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor did United States of America forced to join the war, and consequently a great help for the Allies in defeating the Nazi Germans, Imperial Japanese, and the fascist Italy, hence ending the war with the Allied victory. World War II gave us very important lesson. Imperial domination or territorial expansion, ideologies or racism, and economic crisis are lethal concoction. It was proven after Second World War, where millions of lives wasted. Why do we have to know why Second World War happened? So we can learn from the past and we are not doomed to repeat it. But after Second World War, unfortunately, mass murders and massacres, genocide still happens in the name of ideologies. Let's say communism in Cambodia. In 1979, the Khmer Rouge killed 3 million people, while the racial war in Rwanda in 1994 between the Tutsi and the Hutu tribe, it killed 800,000 people. And just recently, the Syrian civil war, again, it's ideological fight. So, estimated as of now, it killed 400,000 people. When will this end?